I used to think the only thing worth protecting in my home was my safe. That was until I had to install a surveillance camera for my outdoor electrical outlet. And no, I'm not paranoid. I just happen to live next to a self-proclaimed HOA queen who sneaks over to charge her $90,000 0-cents Tesla Model X using my electricity. Night after night, month after month. And the worst part, she acted like it was her right. Welcome to Pinecrest Estates, where I, Tyler Bennett, got dragged into the strangest neighborhood war ever, all because of a hybrid car charging outlet. Comment where you're watching from, and then maybe check if your own outdoor outlet is still yours. And if you think your neighbors are bad, wait until you meet Brenda Harrison. This isn't just about a stolen power outlet. This is a battle for principles, and a trap she's about to walk right into, because when someone abuses power, karma plugs itself in. Let me introduce myself. I'm Tyler Bennett, a 34-year-old software engineer working remotely from my home in Pinecrest Estates, a supposedly upscale HOA community in suburban San Diego. I bought my house here 2 years ago, thinking I was investing in peace and quiet. I'm generally a calm person who avoids conflict, but I'm also a stickler for principles, something I inherited from my dad, who was an electrician before retiring. He always told me, Tyler, electricity isn't just power, it's knowledge. And knowledge is something no one should take from you without permission. Those words would come back to me in ways I never expected. I drive a hybrid that I plug in every night using the outdoor outlet that's part of our community's green initiative. According to HOA rules, each house has a designated outdoor outlet for electric vehicles, but residents pay for their own electricity. It seemed like a straightforward arrangement, until I realized someone was helping themselves to my power without asking. The antagonist in this story is Brenda Harrison, our 45-year-old HOA president. She's a wealthy widow who lives with her 16-year-old daughter, Sophia. Brenda has this superiority complex that makes her believe rules apply to everyone except her. She recently bought a Tesla Model X, a gleaming white monument to her status that cost more than most people's annual salary. It would soon become the center of our conflict. What makes her particularly insufferable is how she inherited a fortune from her late husband, but still introduces herself as a real estate manager, despite not actually working full-time. She's the type who casually mentions her busy schedule while spending most afternoons at the country club, the kind who complains about those struggling financially while simultaneously fighting against reducing the HOA fees that she doesn't even need to worry about. Before our feud began, I'd heard rumors about her having disputes with other residents over HOA regulations. There was the Johnson family, who installed solar panels fully compliant with county regulations, only to receive daily fines for unapproved aesthetic modifications, until they finally relented and removed them. Then there was Mrs. Patel, who was penalized for planting native drought-resistant plants instead of the water-hungry grass Brenda insisted was proper landscaping. But I kept to myself and didn't pay much attention. After all, how bad could it really be? I was about to find out. There are a few other players worth mentioning. Daniel Carter is the 52-year-old HOA vice president who's always supporting Brenda because he secretly wants to sell real estate in our area through his wife's company. Then there's Allison Brooks, my 38-year-old neighbor and ally, an elementary school teacher who Brenda once fined for planting flowers that weren't up to code. William Hudson, a 60-year-old retired police officer who lives across from me, despises the HOA but tolerates it. His experience with security would later prove invaluable. And finally there's Sophia, Brenda's teenage daughter who, unlike her mother, seems to have a conscience. It all started when I noticed something strange on my electricity bill. For 2 consecutive months, my bill had jumped from around $120 to nearly $300, even though I hadn't changed my usage habits. Being a software engineer, I'm naturally analytical, so I began tracking my consumption more carefully. The increase didn't make sense until one night, around 1 a.m, when I was working late on a project. I heard a faint noise outside my window. When I peeked through the blinds, I was shocked to see Brenda Harrison standing near my outdoor electrical outlet, connecting her Tesla's charging cable. She was pretending to walk her dog, but what she was really doing was stealing my electricity. I quickly grabbed my phone and took a few photos as evidence, but I decided not to confront her immediately. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe she'd only done this once or twice. But then I remembered what my father always taught me: stand up for what's yours, but do it smartly. The next morning, I decided to ask William if his security camera might have captured anything. William, being the prepared ex-cop that he is, had an excellent security system that partially covered my driveway. When we reviewed the footage, my jaw dropped. Brenda had been charging her Tesla using my outlet more than 20 times in the past month. Each charging session lasted several hours, typically happening after midnight when she thought no one would notice. William wasn't surprised. "That woman has been causing trouble since she became HOA president 3 years ago," he grumbled. Allison confirmed she'd seen Brenda doing something similar to another neighbor before they installed a lockbox on their outlet. "She targeted the Richards family until they moved out last year," Allison told me. "They complained about her using their electricity, and suddenly they were getting violation notices for everything. Their mailbox being half an inch too tall, their grass being the wrong shade of green. Classic Brenda tactics." After gathering this information, I decided to confront Brenda at the next HOA meeting. I spent the entire night rehearsing what I would say, trying to be firm but polite. I even calculated exactly how much electricity she'd used based on my Tesla-owning friends' consumption rates. Approximately $140 worth over the past month alone. But what I didn't anticipate was that Brenda's reaction would make me realize this battle was just beginning, and it would get much messier than I had imagined. The HOA meeting was held in our community center, a small building with uncomfortable folding chairs arranged in rows, facing a table where Brenda and Daniel sat with other board members. About 20 residents attended, most looking bored or frustrated before the meeting even began. When it came time for resident concerns, I raised my hand and approached the front. I felt a knot in my stomach as all eyes turned to me, but I was determined to address this issue head-on. "I'd like to discuss a matter regarding the use of personal outdoor electrical outlets," I began, keeping my voice steady. "Over the past month, my electricity bill has increased significantly because someone has been using my outlet to charge their vehicle without permission." I then turned directly to Brenda. "Mr. Harrison, I have photographic evidence and video footage showing you connecting your Tesla to my outlet on multiple occasions. I'm simply asking you to stop and perhaps reimburse me for the electricity you've used." The room fell silent. Then Brenda laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Bennett, that's a ridiculous accusation. I have my own charging station at home. Why would I need to use yours?" She looked around the room, playing to the audience. "This is what happens when new residents don't understand community living. Making a fuss over a few dollars of electricity? Really?" I showed her the photos on my phone. This was taken at 1:15 a.m. 2 nights ago. "That's clearly you and your Tesla." Brenda barely glanced at the screen. "That could be anyone. Those images are too dark and probably doctored. If you're having financial difficulties with your utility bills, perhaps Pinecrest Estates isn't the right neighborhood for you." Daniel quickly jumped in. "Tyler, we appreciate your concern, but making accusations against board members without substantial evidence isn't productive. Perhaps you could try to be more cooperative with the community." I noticed Sophia sitting in the back row, looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact with me. When Brenda made her dismissive comments, Sophia's face flushed with what appeared to be embarrassment. It was brief, but I caught it, a silent acknowledgement that her mother was in the wrong. The meeting moved on, with my concern being effectively brushed aside. As I returned to my seat, I could feel Brenda's eyes burning into my back. 2 days later, I received an envelope from the HOA containing violation notices for 5 different infractions: improper landscape maintenance, unauthorized modification to exterior lighting, improper trash can storage, a mailbox that needed repainting, and parking my car in the driveway for more than 6 hours. Each violation carried a $50 fine, totaling $250. That evening, William Hudson knocked on my door. "I saw the violation truck making rounds at your house yesterday," he said, stepping inside. "Let me guess, multiple infractions out of nowhere?" I showed him the notices. William nodded knowingly. "You're not the first person Brenda has retaliated against. Last year, the Morgans questioned her decision to use HOA funds for new landscaping at her house, claiming it was for community improvement. They received similar notices the next week and eventually moved out after being fined thousands of dollars over 6 months. I felt a mix of anger and determination rising within me. So what do I do? Just pay these ridiculous fines and let her keep stealing my electricity? William placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've got 2 choices. Surrender and pay the fines, or fight back. But if you choose to fight, you need to be smart about it." I remembered my father's advice. If someone tries to take what's yours, defend it, but be smarter, not stronger. At that moment, I decided I wasn't going to back down. Brenda had picked the wrong person to bully, and I was about to teach her that actions have consequences. The next day, I began implementing my counterattack plan, but this wasn't going to be just any plan. As a software engineer with electronics expertise inherited from my electrician father, I had the skills to create something special. I wasn't just going to catch her in the act. I was going to trap her there. First, I designed a custom electromagnetic locking mechanism that would activate when someone plugged in a charging cable without entering the correct code on a hidden keypad. Once triggered, the charging cable would be impossible to remove for 15 minutes while simultaneously sending alerts to my phone. To make it look ordinary, I disguised the whole setup inside what appeared to be a standard weatherproof outdoor outlet cover. William, impressed with my creativity, helped me add a few extra features. If you're going this far, let's make sure we get solid evidence, he suggested. We installed a concealed high-definition camera with night vision and motion detection that would begin recording the moment anyone approached the outlet. The setup would also trigger subtle ground-level LED lights that would illuminate the area without being obvious. Perfect for clear video footage, even at night. The beauty of this system, I explained to William as we tested it, is that once she plugs in, she's stuck there. She can either abandon her expensive Tesla charging cable or wait until the system releases it, giving us plenty of time to catch her red. Just to be safe, William advised, I'd post a small notice stating that unauthorized use of the outlet will activate a security system. That way, she can't claim entrapment. I placed a tiny warning sign beside the outlet that read, "Notice, secured outlet. Unauthorized use will activate security measures." The sign was small enough that someone would need to be right at the outlet to read it, which Brenda would be, but only after she'd already committed to her midnight theft routine. While shopping for the final components at the local hardware store, I ran into Sophia, Brenda's daughter. She looked nervous when she saw me, but didn't walk away. "I'm sorry about what happened at the meeting," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "My mom is really angry about you calling her out. She's planning something, but I don't know what." "Thanks for telling me," I replied, genuinely appreciative of her honesty. "It's not your fault, you know." Sophia nodded sadly. "She's been different since Dad died. More controlling, always worried about money even though she pretends we're doing fine." Before she could say more, her phone buzzed. "I have to go, just be careful." That conversation gave me insight into what might be driving Brenda's behavior, but it didn't excuse her actions. A few days later, Daniel Carter stopped by my house, claiming he wanted to smooth things over. But his real intention was obvious. He was fishing for information, trying to gauge how serious I was about fighting back. "The board is willing to reduce your fines if you'll drop this electricity matter," he offered with a practiced smile. "We're all neighbors here. There's no need for conflict." "I agree," I replied calmly. "There wouldn't be any conflict if people respected each other's property. I'm not going to back down on this. I have proof, and I intend to use it." After Daniel left, William told me something concerning. Brenda was working to rush through new HOA regulations regarding outdoor electrical outlets and security cameras. She was trying to create new rules that would force me to remove my security measures and make my outlet accessible for emergency purposes. A thinly veiled attempt to continue her free charging. "You need to get your evidence before that meeting next week," William warned. "Otherwise, she might actually get away with this." With my trap fully operational, I didn't have to wait long. Late one night, just as I was about to go to bed, my phone buzzed with a security alert. The camera had detected movement near my outlet. I watched the live feed as Brenda approached, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and then began connecting her Tesla charging cable. The moment she plugged it in, the electromagnetic lock engaged with a soft click. When she tried to leave a few minutes later, she discovered she couldn't remove her charging cable. The panic on her face was priceless as she pulled and twisted, growing increasingly frantic. After several minutes of struggling, she finally noticed the small warning sign. Her face turned from panicked to furious as she realized what had happened. I calmly called William, who came over immediately. Together, we walked outside just as Brenda was trying to call someone on her phone, presumably Daniel for backup. "Having some trouble, Mrs. Harrison?" I asked pleasantly, holding up my phone showing the live video feed. "It seems you're stuck." "This is illegal," she spluttered. "You can't trap people's property like this." "Actually," William interjected. What's illegal is trespassing and theft of utilities. The security system on private property is fully legal, especially with posted warnings. He pointed to the small sign she had clearly ignored. I've documented over 20 instances of you stealing electricity, I continued. That's approximately $300.00 worth of power you've taken without permission. Not to mention the retaliatory HOA violations you issued after I brought it up at the meeting. By now, a few neighbors had noticed the commotion and were watching from their porches. Brenda realized she was caught, literally and figuratively. Fine, she hissed. How much do you want to make this go away? This isn't about money, I replied. It's about accountability. The system will release your cable in about, I checked my watch, 10 more minutes. That should give us enough time to discuss how you're going to address this with the entire community. The trap had worked better than I could have imagined. Not only had I caught Brenda in the act, but her desperate attempts to free her charging cable had created a spectacle that several neighbors had witnessed. By morning, word had spread throughout Pinecrest Estates, and residents were sharing the security footage I'd posted to our community online forum. The violation hearing was held in the same community center as our regular meetings, but with a much larger audience. Nearly half the community showed up, curious about the drama they'd heard about. Brenda sat at the center of the table, looking uncharacteristically subdued as she called the hearing to order. I arrived prepared with a folder containing printed copies of the HOA regulations, photographs documenting the supposed violations, and timestamps proving that some of the violations were issued before the alleged infractions even occurred. When it was my turn to speak, I methodically addressed each violation, citing specific bylaw sections and presenting evidence that contradicted the notices. According to Section 5.3 of the Landscape Guidelines amended in March, ornamental grasses up to 36 inches are permitted in side yards. My plants are 32 inches tall and located in my side yard, not the front yard as cited in the violation, I explained, showing photos with measurements. I continued this way through each infraction, watching Brenda's expression grow increasingly frustrated as I dismantled her case point by point. When I finished my defense, Brenda tried to interrupt and change the subject, but I stood my ground. I'd also like to address the real reason for these sudden violations, I said firmly, pulling out the photos and video footage of Brenda using my charging outlet and getting caught in my trap. As everyone can see in this footage that's been circulating online, these targeted violations appeared only after I confronted Mrs. Harrison about her unauthorized use of my electricity. The room erupted in murmurs and some barely suppressed laughter. Many were holding up their phones, showing they'd already seen the viral video of their HOA president frantically trying to free her Tesla's charging cable in the middle of the night. Daniel tried to cut me off. This is irrelevant to the violations at hand. Actually, it's entirely relevant, interrupted William, standing up. If the board is issuing retaliatory violations, that's an abuse of power. Brenda's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This meeting is about Mr. Bennett's violations, not some fabricated story about electricity theft. Several other residents began sharing their own experiences with suspicious violations after disagreeing with Brenda on various matters. The atmosphere in the room had shifted decisively in my favor. The board members, seeing which way the wind was blowing, voted to dismiss all my violations except for the mailbox repainting, which I agreed was legitimate. As the meeting concluded, Brenda announced in a tight voice, "The board will be proposing amendments to our regulations regarding security equipment and outdoor utilities at next month's meeting. These changes are necessary for community safety." Her eyes locked with mine, silently declaring war. After the meeting, I learned from a sympathetic board member that Brenda was indeed pushing for new rules that would prohibit invasive surveillance equipment and require outdoor electrical outlets to remain accessible for emergency purposes. She had 2 weeks to gather support before the vote. I needed to act quickly to gather support against these new rules. With William's guidance, I took my security measures to the next level. I installed a separate electric meter specifically for the outdoor outlet to precisely measure any unauthorized usage. I expanded my camera system to include better night vision and real-time motion alerts. Most importantly, I modified my electromagnetic trap to also spray a harmless but bright neon-colored dye that would mark anyone attempting to tamper with the outlet, a dye that would remain visible for days, even with washing. This dye is completely non-toxic, I explained to William as I installed the small reservoir. It's actually derived from the same compounds used in food coloring, but with a polymer binding agent that makes it semi-permanent. It won't harm skin or clothing permanently, but it will take at least a week of scrubbing to completely remove it. Brilliant, William chuckled. It's like catching someone red-handed, except they'll be blue-handed. I had chosen a particularly vibrant shade of blue, one that would be immediately noticeable and difficult to explain away. The spray mechanism was designed to activate only if someone attempted to forcibly remove a charging cable without entering the proper code, or if they tried to damage the lockbox. A fine mist would deploy from nearly invisible nozzles, covering the perpetrator's hands and potentially their clothing. Is this going too far? I asked William, suddenly concerned about potential backlash. Tyler, he said seriously, this woman has been stealing from you and bullying the entire community for years. She's abused her power, filed fraudulent violations, and shown absolutely no remorse. Sometimes people like that need a visible reminder of their actions. He paused, then added with a wink, besides, blue is a lovely color. Meanwhile, I began quietly building a coalition among the residents. Allison introduced me to others who had been on the receiving end of Brenda's tactics. We started collecting signatures opposing the proposed rule changes, being careful not to attract too much attention. During this time, Sophia reached out to me again, this time through a note left in my mailbox asking to meet at the community park. Mom's been acting crazy since the incident, Sophia confided when we met, sitting on a bench far from any houses. She's obsessed with getting back at you. I think it's because we're actually having financial problems. Dad's insurance money isn't lasting as long as she expected, but she's too proud to cut back on anything. She's been coming home late at night ranting about you, Sophia continued, fidgeting with her phone case. She's called you everything from that tech troublemaker to words I'd rather not repeat. Last night, she was on the phone with Daniel for hours, talking about ways to change the HOA rules to target you specifically. Has she mentioned anything about my security system? I asked carefully. Sophia nodded. She thinks she can outsmart it somehow. I heard her telling Daniel she's going to take care of it once and for all. I'm not sure what she's planning, but she seemed really determined. This information was valuable, but I assured Sophia that my issue wasn't with her. You're not responsible for your mom's actions, I told her. I just want her to stop taking advantage of people. I know, she said quietly. Sometimes I think Mom forgot what Dad used to say about treating others with respect. It's like after he died, she had to prove something to everyone, show that she was strong or powerful or something. She looked up with a sadness beyond her years, but I think she's just scared. With all my preparations in place, I waited to see if Brenda would take the bait again. I deliberately made my outlet appear vulnerable by replacing the electromagnetic lock with what looked like a simpler padlock, though behind the scenes my enhanced security system remained fully operational. Late one night, just as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a security alert. The camera had detected movement near my outlet. I watched the live feed as Brenda returned, this time with bolt cutters, a serious escalation from her previous trespassing. She was dressed in dark clothing and wore what appeared to be gardening gloves, clearly prepared for a more aggressive approach. My heart raced as I watched her examine the padlock, testing its strength before positioning the bolt cutters. With a decisive squeeze, she cut through what she thought was a standard padlock. Her triumphant smile was visible even in the night vision footage as she removed the broken lock and tossed it aside. She connected her Tesla charging cable, and for a moment everything seemed normal. The charging light on her vehicle illuminated, indicating power was flowing. Brenda looked around smugly, believing she had outsmarted me. She even gave a little mock salute toward my house before turning to leave. That's when my enhanced system activated. First, the electromagnetic lock engaged silently, securing the charging cable in place. Brenda took about 5 steps before realizing something was wrong. When she turned back to check, she noticed the cable was stuck. She pulled harder, frustrated by the resistance. As she continued to struggle with the cable, yanking with increasing force, the motion sensor detected her tampering attempts. Without warning, the dye system deployed. A fine mist of bright blue dye sprayed in a carefully calibrated pattern, covering her hands, forearms, and splattering across her face and designer white jacket. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Brenda's shriek of outrage was clearly audible on the video feed. "What the?" she yelled, momentarily forgetting she was supposed to be stealthy. She stared at her now blue hands in horror. frantically trying to wipe them on her clothes, which only spread the dye further. The more she rubbed, the more it set into her skin. My system had automatically uploaded the footage to the cloud and sent notification links to a pre-selected group of community members, including several board members who had been skeptical of my claims. William received the alert too, and I could see him emerging from his house across the street, phone in hand, recording the scene. I threw on a robe and hurried outside, barely containing my satisfaction at seeing the trap work perfectly. When I approached, Brenda was still struggling with the charging cable, her blue-stained hands slipping off the connector as she tried desperately to free it. "Need some help, Mrs. Harrison?" I asked innocently. She whipped around, her face a mottled pattern of normal skin tone and bright blue splotches. "You?" she snarled. "Look what you've done. This jacket is Burberry. Do you have any idea how much it costs? You'll be paying for this." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I'm pretty sure destroying personal property, like my padlock that you just cut, is a crime. Not to mention trespassing and theft of utilities. Again. This is assault," she stammered, holding up her blue hands accusingly. "No, it's a security measure, clearly marked by that warning sign," I pointed out. "The dye is completely harmless, food grade actually, though I should warn you it might take a week or so to completely wash off." By this point, Willem had joined us, along with several other neighbors who had received the alert or heard Brenda's outburst. Mrs. Patel was there with her phone recording again, and the Johnsons watched from their driveway. Even Daniel had emerged from his house a few doors down, his expression shifting from confusion to horror as he realized what was happening. "My phone automatically uploads this footage to the cloud," I explained to the growing audience. "I've just informed the rest of the board about this second incident. Would you like to offer any explanation before they all see you caught blue-handed?" Brenda looked around at the neighbors, many of whom were now openly recording the scene with their phones. The blue dye on her face made her flush of embarrassment even more pronounced. "This isn't over," she hissed, before turning to Daniel. "Don't just stand there, do something." Daniel, however, seemed to be rapidly calculating his own political future in the HOA. I'm not sure what you expect me to do, Brenda," he said hesitantly. "This is the second time you've been caught using Tyler's electricity without permission." "Traitor," she spat. After about 15 minutes, the electromagnetic lock released the charging cable as programmed. Brenda yanked it free and stormed toward her Tesla, leaving bright blue fingerprints on the white door as she got in. As she drove away, tires squealing slightly, neighbors began to applaud. By morning, the video of Brenda's second failed theft attempt had spread even more widely than the first. The image of the HOA president, covered in blue dye, frantically trying to wipe it off her expensive clothes while cursing at the camera, had become a community sensation. Some creative residents had even turned it into memes that were circulating on local social media groups, with captions like, "Feeling blue about your electricity bill?" and "OH Blues, when power corrupts." 2 days before the special HOA meeting, Brenda was in full damage control mode. She'd realized that opposition to her proposed rule changes was growing, largely thanks to our behind-the-scenes organizing and the viral videos that had exposed her behavior. In response, she scheduled the meeting at an inconvenient time, 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, when most residents would be working, and invited the HOA's lawyer to intimidate potential dissenters. The community center was surprisingly full, despite the awkward timing. Word had spread about the showdown, and even residents who normally avoided HOA drama had shown up, many curious to see if Brenda would still have blue-tinged skin. Brenda called the emergency meeting to order, framing it as an urgent discussion about neighborhood security concerns. "Recent events have highlighted the need for updated regulations," Brenda announced, wearing long sleeves and gloves despite the warm weather, an obvious attempt to hide the residual dye stains. "We've drafted amendments prohibiting invasive surveillance equipment that violates community members' privacy, and requiring outdoor electrical outlets to remain accessible for emergency purposes." Daniel elaborated on the supposed safety concerns, painting me as a troublemaker who wasn't cooperating with community standards. When they opened the floor for comments, several residents raised concerns about the vague language and rushed nature of the proposals. Brenda dismissed each objection with practiced condescension. "These changes are for everyone's protection," she insisted. I remained silent, waiting for the perfect moment. Just as the discussion was winding down and Brenda was preparing to call for a vote, I raised my hand. Brenda reluctantly acknowledged me. Before we vote, I think everyone should see something relevant to these proposed changes, I said, connecting my laptop to the projector. The room darkened and a compilation video began playing, showing not just my footage, but security camera recordings shared by other residents. The compilation revealed a pattern. Brenda had been stealing electricity from at least 5 different homes throughout the community, always late at night when she thought no one would notice. The room fell completely silent as the video played. When it ended, I stood up. I've installed a separate electric meter on my outdoor outlet. It shows that over the past 3 months, Mrs. Harrison has used approximately $400 worth of electricity from my home to charge her Tesla. Before Brenda could interrupt, I continued. And, as we can now see, mine wasn't the only home affected. I then played a separate clip showing Daniel Carter meeting with Brenda late at night, speaking quietly about which houses had security cameras and which didn't. Clearly, planning which outlets were safe to target. "You recorded me without permission?" Daniel spluttered, his face pale. "The recordings were made on private property with proper signage," William interjected from his seat. "The community needs to know what's happening." Brenda stood up, her face contorted with rage beneath her makeup, which couldn't quite hide all the blue stains. "This is absurd. You've been harassing me for months. I had every right to—" She stopped abruptly, realizing what she was about to admit. "You had every right to what, Mrs. Harrison?" I prompted. "To break my property, to steal my electricity, to abuse your position as HOA president, to retaliate against me?" "I did it because you deserved it," Brenda shouted, losing control completely. "Who do you think you are, coming into my community and challenging me?" The entire room was stunned into silence. Then, unexpectedly, Sophia stood up from the back row. "It's true," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I've seen Mom taking electricity from Tyler's house multiple times. She's been doing it to other houses too, whenever she thinks she can get away with it." Brenda turned to her daughter in disbelief. "Sophia, sit down." "No, Mom," Sophia replied firmly. "This has to stop. You're embarrassing yourself and me." The meeting erupted into chaos. Residents began demanding answers about other HOA decisions Brenda had made. In the midst of the commotion, William approached the front table with a folder. "While we're addressing concerns about Mrs. Harrison's leadership," he announced loudly, "I think everyone should see what I found in the HOA financial records, which are technically public documents." William proceeded to share his discovery. Brenda had been misappropriating HOA funds for personal expenses, including Tesla insurance payments and maintenance costs for her home that were disguised as community improvements. He had meticulously tracked suspicious transactions going back 18 months, revealing a pattern of financial abuse totaling over $20,000. The remaining board members exchanged panicked glances, suddenly realizing their own involvement. With that reality settling in, the damage was done. Residents unanimously voted to conduct a full financial audit and hold an emergency election to replace Brenda and the current board. Brenda was forced to resign on the spot, agreeing to reimburse me for the stolen electricity and repair the damaged lockbox to avoid potential legal trouble. Daniel, desperate to save himself, turned against Brenda completely, revealing additional information about other questionable decisions they had made together. In a matter of hours, Brenda's carefully constructed power structure had completely collapsed, brought down by a simple but brilliant trap that had exposed her true nature to the entire community. In the aftermath, several residents approached me about running for HOA president, but I declined. Instead, I suggested Allison, whose fairness and community-mindedness made her perfect for the role. She was elected by an overwhelming majority, along with a completely new board committed to transparency and actual community service. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of Brenda's financial mismanagement came to light. She had been using HOA funds not just for her Tesla expenses, but for various personal costs, attempting to maintain a lifestyle she could no longer afford after her husband's death. The audit revealed that the community pool renovation that had been delayed due to contractor issues was actually because Brenda had diverted those funds elsewhere. Faced with the evidence and the threat of public humiliation, Brenda agreed to repay all misappropriated funds and put her house on the market. Before she moved out, Sophia came to see me one more time. "I've always known what Mom was doing was wrong," she admitted, tears in her eyes. "But I didn't know what to do about it. I was afraid she would hate me if I said anything." "Standing up for what's right is hard," I told her, "especially when it's someone you love. You showed a lot of courage." Sophia would be staying with a friend's family to finish the school year, beginning the process of reconciling with her mother from a healthier distance. "Mom needs help," she said. Maybe now she'll actually get it. Under Allison's leadership, the HOA implemented new rules about financial transparency and resident rights. I kept my electromagnetic outlet trap installed as something of a neighborhood legend, a reminder of how one person's clever solution had brought down a petty tyrant. The story of the Tesla trap spread to neighboring communities, and I even received requests to help other homeowners design similar systems. Within a month, our community newsletter was transformed. Instead of pages of regulations and violation warnings, it now featured resident spotlights, community events, and helpful tips. The first issue after Brenda's departure included a full-page guide on understanding your electricity usage that I was asked to write, a subtle but satisfying acknowledgement of how the whole situation had started. William, who had been instrumental in helping me design the trap, became something of a community security consultant. He started a neighborhood watch program that focused on actual safety rather than rule enforcement. It's about looking out for each other, not policing each other, he explained at the first meeting, which was held in my backyard as a symbolic gesture. Perhaps the most surprising development was how the blue dye incident, as it came to be known, inspired a community art project. Mrs. Patel, who had been recording the confrontation, proposed a mural for the blank wall of our community center. The design featured a vibrant blue handprint surrounded by colorful representations of our diverse neighborhood homes. The title, Power to the People, carried a double meaning that wasn't lost on anyone. Brenda's unintentional blue handprints had become a symbol of community empowerment. Relationships between neighbors flourished without Brenda's divisive leadership. People who had lived side by side for years without speaking began hosting block parties, sharing gardening tips, and even starting a community tool-sharing program. The collective experience of overcoming a common adversary had created bonds that transformed Pinecrest Estates from a collection of houses into a genuine community. A week before Brenda was set to move out, I happened to be walking my newly adopted rescue dog when I passed by her house. Through the open garage door, I glimpsed her sitting in her Tesla, staring blankly ahead. Some of the blue dye was still visible on her jawline and hands, despite her obvious attempts to scrub it away. Sophia was loading boxes into her friend's car when she noticed me and walked over. "She's not doing great," Sophia said quietly, nodding toward her mother. "Last night she broke down and told me she lost control of everything. Her finances after Dad died, then her emotions, then her judgment. She said she knows what she did was wrong but couldn't stop herself." Sophia looked conflicted. "It doesn't excuse what she did to you and everyone else, but I think she's finally facing reality." I nodded, unsure what to say. It was hard to feel sympathy for someone who'd caused so much trouble, but there was something deeply human about seeing someone forced to confront their own failings. "I'm staying with my aunt until school ends," Sophia continued. "Mom's actually agreed to see a therapist, something she refused to do after Dad died. I think maybe this needed to happen." She glanced back at her mother, who remained motionless in the Tesla. "It's weird, but your blue dye might have been the wake-up call she needed." I reached out and gave Sophia's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "You're a good daughter, much better than she deserved." "Maybe," she replied with a sad smile. "But we don't help people because they deserve it. We do it because they need it." With that wisdom beyond her ears, she returned to loading boxes, and I continued my walk, thinking about how consequences sometimes arrive in unexpected forms, like bright blue dye that forces you to see yourself clearly. In a quiet moment during the community's first ever neighborhood cookout, I found myself wondering if my trap had been too elaborate, too embarrassing for Brenda. But then I remembered all the families she had driven away, the money she had stolen, and the community she had damaged with her entitlement and greed. Sometimes, standing up to a bully isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about protecting everyone else too. 6 months later, as our community continued to thrive under Allison's inclusive leadership, I received an email from the HOA of Brenda's new neighborhood, asking about her residency history as part of their standard verification process for new board applicants. Apparently, she was trying to run for a position there. I smiled and attached all my documentation and videos, along with a simple message: lock your electrical outlets. The next day, I received a grateful reply. "Thank you for the warning. She's already proposed fining residents for growing vegetables in pots and has requested community funds to build a private charging station in the tennis court area." I quickly responded, Just don't let her near any unlocked electrical outlets, and maybe keep some blue dye on hand. Trust me, that's only the beginning. They say electricity follows the path of least resistance. So do bullies. But sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to create resistance, or in my case, an electromagnetic lock and some permanent dye, to change the current completely. In our community's case, it didn't just stop a thief. It sparked a revolution that made Pinecrest Estates a better place to live for everyone. The most incredible part of this story isn't my clever trap or even Brenda's spectacular downfall. It's what happened after. How a community that had lived in fear and isolation came together. How neighbors became friends. And how one small act of standing up for what's right created a ripple effect of positive change. And if you ever wonder whether it's worth standing up to someone who's abusing their power, just remember my dad's advice. Stand up for what's yours, but do it smartly. In my case, that meant letting technology do the confrontation for me, and letting Brenda's own actions speak louder than any accusation I could have made. So check your outdoor outlets, folks. You never know who might be plugging in when you're not looking. And if you find yourself with an HOA Karen of your own, well, let's just say a little ingenuity goes a long way. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just catching someone red-hand, it's catching them blue-hand on camera for the whole world to see.
QA stories where reality feels like fiction and fiction wishes it was this juicy. Hit that like before the next bombshell drops.